I had a dream, which was really weird, but I had a dream that I got a phone call at work, and it was the detective telling me that they caught the guy who killed my son. And which was really weird because a few months later that exactly happened. I'm at my desk in my office. The detective calls, and he told me he needed me to come to the police station, that they had someone in custody who had killed my son. So when I got there, the first thing that he told me is that the person that they had in custody was a paraplegic. And as much as I wanted someone to pay for what they did to my son, I was really hoping that they had the wrong person, because I couldn't grasp the fact that someone who's a paraplegic because he was shot would go around and do this to someone else. I was so hoping that they had the wrong person. But when I saw the evidence that they had against him, surely it was him. The detective already had the suspicions, because in the exact same corner, 6 months after my son was shot, another young man was killed in the same corner, and that's not a usual corner where they would have shootings. I guess when he started getting to know, talking to some of the people from the neighborhood, family members, it ended up that it was him. With the video, they had cameras, the pod cameras that showed him on that night, racing through stop signs, and the type of car that it was his. It was just a whole lot of things that ended up pointing back to him. And they found some girls that were actually in the car with him that night. He was supposed to drive him to a party. I guess they were walking, and he was supposed to drive him to a party, and they were going to go to the liquor store and get something to drink. When he did that, he actually pulled the gun out to another car before he did my son. But that guy rolled down the window, and the girls knew the guys in that car, and they said, "Don't shoot, because he's one of us from a different neighborhood." And so he rolled his window back up, went to the red light, and he started shooting. He shot my son, my stepson. I had no idea of what it was like to go to 26 in California. I've never been there before. You only hear about it, but I'll tell you something. When I first walked into that building, it just felt eerie and dirty, and you almost feel like we're the guilty party. For some reason, in my fantasy world, I just assumed that when you walk in there, that everybody should know that my son was the one that was murdered. And we feel like we should maybe have a special door where we can walk through, and we don't have to see these criminals that are walking through the door. I never missed a day. There was statuses every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, and I went to every single one for 4 years, because I knew that he was going to have his family members or his gang members there, and I wanted them to know that my son also had family and had people that care about him. And I was going to be his voice, and I was going to be the one to represent him and to be there for his kids, and I was going to be there, and I was not going to quit. And as horrible as it was, I knew that I was going to be there to be a voice for my son. To be in the same room with this guy in a wheelchair and his family members, at first I was scared, but it didn't matter because they took my son's life. But somehow you build up this shield, this strength, and you kind of just suck it up. And you walk in there and you do what you need to do. We would listen to the family members talk stuff and stare at us, try to stare at us down. And no matter what I felt on the inside, I never wanted them to see me scared, because to me that gave them even more power than they already had. I think somehow these guys would try to intimidate me by looks or things that they said, or some of the girls, there was females that would show up there in the beginning, and I think they would try to do that to scare me, like if that was going to stop me from coming, if somehow it almost felt like I was the one pressing charges. I don't think that their concept was like everything that was happening to the guy who killed my son, like it was all my fault. And that's almost the way they make you feel. Like I did this to him, and now poor him, he's in jail for pulling a trigger. I think being there matters because the judge, whether I was there for 4 years, I knew he saw my face. And I wanted him to know that my son had a mom who cared about him and was going to do whatever it is that she needed to do, even though he wasn't the one that was going to find him guilty, because it was a jury trial. He was the one that when they found him guilty, he was going to sentence him. And I wanted him to know that I cared. The jury did notice, even though they give him the rules of, not looking at the family members or not, reacting to whatever it is that you see out there. They know and they pay attention. And I wanted to make sure that all our family and friends were there every day so they could see that he had a lot of people that cared about him. On the day when, for the impact statement, they asked me to write, obviously, they tell you to start doing that ahead of time, but it's really hard to do because you write, you erase, you write, you erase, and you do that for weeks at a time. But at the last minute, I knew they were texting me and letting me know that they needed it within the next day. I just closed off myself to the world and just started writing. I know they were giving us restrictions on what we can and can't say. My daughter-in-law actually wrote that there was a special place in hell for people like him, and she actually was told that she can't say that, that she needed to rephrase those words, which was very disturbing and frustrating because he killed my son, and I have to worry about what people are going to think or say, or the jury or his family, to think that there's a place in hell. And that's the way she felt, and I think that's what she should be able to say. I understand that we need to be respectful to the court system, and I understand that, but I don't think that was being disrespectful. I think that was being open and honest. So it was very difficult to write because of that. But when I did finally write it, I'll tell you, even till now, I have no idea what I wrote. It's like, and I've said this, and I think it happens to a lot of moms because I know it happened to me. I felt when I got up on the stand, when I wrote, like I step outside my body, and I'm watching Lifetime, a thriller story about the neighbor that you don't want as your neighbor. And I'm just sitting there watching it because that's not my life. It's not what I worked so hard for. I wanted my son to have a good life.